I'd like to welcome everyone to this first of the Sunday afternoon talks for 2012. And the theme for the afternoon is, well, the title is The Cup is Already Broken. So those of you who are familiar with Ajahn Chah's teachings might recognize that kind of phraseology immediately, and those of you who are unfamiliar with Ajahn Chah's teachings will think, what? Which cup? Who broke it? The wording comes from a particular analogy that Ajahn Chah used very, very often in his teachings. And he would very regularly pick up a glass like this and say, this glass is already broken, even when there was some water in it or something else. He'd say, Gao ni, dek lao, dek lao. And so this glass is already broken. And at that time I didn't spend a huge amount of time with Ajahn Chah, and my Thai was not very good, and I couldn't really catch the nuances of what he was saying, but I understood Gao meaning glass, and Dek meaning broken, and Lao meaning already. So I thought, well, that's interesting, because the water's not dripping out. Well, that's kind of interesting. I can't see a crack anywhere, but he says it's broken, so I guess it must be. And so I was far from getting the point at that stage of things. But as I began to understand, and then talking with the other monks who would explain things, and as I listened more to Ajahn Chah, I realized that what he meant by this idea, this principle that the glass is already broken, is that this is a way that we can develop the insight into impermanence, or this is how we can develop the quality of wisdom and learn how to live in a wise and harmonious way in the world. Because the eye that can see that this glass is already broken, is that, as he would say, that when the day comes when the elements actually separate, then we won't be surprised or disappointed. We'll know, oh, it was broken already, so it's just fulfilling what was already part of the program. But if you think this is a glass and it's supposed to be a glass permanently, and that that's its job and that's its sole purpose in the universe, then, and we're attached to it being a glass rather than seeing it as nature in a state of change, then when the glass breaks, then our heart breaks too. And an instance of this, or one very clear illustration of this, right around that same time, when I was a novice or a young monk in Thailand, was one day there was a Thai monk who was living at the monastery for Westerners, Wat Pah Nanachat, which is about 5 miles away from the main monastery, from Ajahn Chah's monastery. And this monk was working on the sewing machine. Like we sew all our own robes, and so we would use these treadle sewing machines, because in those days there was no electricity in the monasteries either, so we had to learn how to use a treadle sewing machine. And of course most young males growing up in the West have never hardly even seen a sewing machine, let alone learn to use one. So that was part of our life, was learning how to become acquainted with and how to work a sewing machine. And this monk was working on some aspect of the machinery of this sewing machine, and had a screwdriver, and he was trying to turn this screw, which was very seriously stuck. And so I got very intent, was watching him very closely, and got involved with this effort of trying to get this screw to budge. And suddenly, bang! The screwdriver broke. And the first thought in my mind was, damn! The screwdriver broke. And what he says, as my mind thought, damn, what he said was Anicca, meaning impermanent. So and that really struck me. Like, his first thought was, the impermanence, the inherent impermanence of the screwdriver just manifested. Whereas I thought, this screwdriver just failed us. The screwdriver has failed. But he didn't see that. He thought, its screwdriveringness has just come to an end. So this is a change of view, or a change of perception, and that's what this, the theme of this talk is about, that, because we can look at something like a screwdriver, or we can look at a glass and we can say, oh yeah, I can understand that principle. If we can imagine that it's already broken, that it's just a collection of elements in a state of change, then of course one day those elements are going to separate from each other, whether it's in 1 year or 2 years or 5 minutes or 100 years or 5,000 years, or at the ending of the solar system when the Earth gets absorbed into the sun, in billions of years' time. That glass, at some point along the way, is going to stop being a glass, right? It's an inarguable reality. So that when we can see that for something simple like a glass or a screwdriver, then we then have the task of then translating that into other areas of our life, because we can say, oh yeah, of course the glass is like that, but then we have to see or look into the areas. We don't have to, but it's helpful if we look into the areas of our life where we take these same kind of views, that something is permanent, like this body of ours, or our possessions, or our home, our job, or our livelihood, our faculties. We tend to think of this. Well, this is my body, and it's supposed to work and be comfortable. My senses are supposed to function. My eyes are supposed to see clearly. My ears are supposed to work at full capacity. I'm supposed to be fully mobile. I'm not supposed to have any discomfort whatsoever. And isn't that the deal? And the Buddha encouraged over and over again to recognize that is not the deal. That when we are born, these bodies similarly are in a constant state of change. Just watching the activities of a baby or a young child. There was a few kids here this morning that were in absolutely non-stop motion. They were demonstrating the truth of Anicca, impermanence, second by second. And the changing nature of our bodies. 50 years ago, we all looked a lot different. Those of us who were alive 50 years ago, we all looked a lot different. I was 5 years old, just coming up to my 6th birthday. So something changed, didn't it? So the body is in a constant state of change. It's not something that is fixed or permanent. The nature of our possessions, the things that we call our own, like our clothes, or our car, or our homes, these are things which we gather around us or associate with our names. And we think of them as being ours. We got the name on the documents. Yes, this is my car, or this is my house, or this is my job, or we have those kind of arrangements in our lives. But it's out of our force of habit, and what we would, in Buddhist terminology, call ignorance, that we say, no, that is mine. That is my car. That is my house. Or no, this is my job. But then when you come into work and you find that they've been downsizing over the weekend, and you haven't got a job anymore, you say, well, that's my job. You say, well, no, it's not. That fragile nature of what we call ownership, or of what we call solidity, is what this is talking about. And so that the Buddha encouraged this kind of active investigation, the active sort of exploring of those presumptions that we make. And so that thank you. So that we are highlighting those areas of our lives where we don't realize that the cup is already broken, that we think that this is always a cup and it's always supposed to be this way, like our body and our faculties and so forth. So there was a series of reflections that the Buddha encouraged people to look at and to consider every day, called the 5 subjects of frequent recollection, being I am of the nature to age, I am of the nature to sicken, I am of the nature to die. All that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. You might feel this is really depressing. I had much better things to do with my Sunday afternoon than to come and get depressed in a Buddhist monastery. And then the last of the 5 is, I am the owner of my karma, heir to my karma, born of my karma, related to my karma, abide supported by my karma. Whatever karma I shall do, for good or for ill, of that I will be the heir. So the Buddha was not being sadistic or just trying to make people feel miserable by saying, you should recollect that you're getting older. You should recollect that you're of the nature to sicken and that you're going to die, and all that you love is going to leave you. You think, well, how can that be not depressing? But the interesting thing is, and what Ajahn Chah was pointing to in his example of seeing the brokenness in the cup while the cup is still in one piece, is that in exactly the same way, when we bring our attention to our body, our life, our sense of well-being, our possessions, all that is near and dear to us, when we recognize, of course, well, these things have come together, so necessarily they're going to separate at some point along the way. These things are going to separate, that my faculties are changing. Just yesterday I went to give a Dhamma talk at the Selfcentered place in Wales, and it was a long road trip yesterday and back again this morning, and those road signs are getting far more blurry. I used to be, and I realize now, I used to be very proud of the fact that I could read road signs at an enormous distance, and I realize, not anymore. There goes another one. So if I think I've got the right to be able to read road signs at 150 yards, then now I'm in a deprived state. But if I've been wise along the way, I recognize, well, that's kind of neat. I can read road signs when they're 150, 200 yards off, but this is a temporary condition. This is not a given. This is just something that I'm blessed with by having good eyes, and now it's changing. At the age of 55, then the eyes are doing their thing. They're going the way that they need to go to follow the laws of nature. So when we consider things in this way, and then we say cultivate these kind of recollections, it's not just repeating a formula, but it's what is really helpful about them. What is the useful element is taking that to heart, really letting that in and digesting it, so that we are able to consider, this is it's not just repeating a formula or doing this because the Buddha said you should, or that I went to Amaro and they chant this regularly, or this is what was in the book, or this was what the Ajahn said, but more to see how that helps us along the way, and to digest that kind of reflection, and also to be creative with it. So we're not just following a formula in a book, but also recognizing how that relates to our possessions, our relationships. Friendships come together and then friendships break up. There are the aspects of our family, the good relations in the family, or closeness of the family, and then people move away. Your kids immigrate to Australia or Canada or to the other places around the world. These are simple, ordinary, everyday things, but it's good to recognize, oh yes, this is part of having children as they grow up and they move away, and that we don't know what's going to happen to them. The nature of our faculties, our reputation, the sense of being pleased with how things are going. Say maybe you're a person who's admired in your profession, you're a well-regarded engineer or a teacher or a doctor, and there's something you're very pleased about that, glad to be looked up to and being asked to go to all sorts of meetings, or to be, not another award ceremony, I can't stand it, This is so tedious. But something in you is like, that is quite pleased with the tedium of being given another prize or being respected. But then, when we recognize the cup is already broken, it's like when you become retired or being an ex-member of the board or an ex-director or an ex-teacher or an ex-judge or whatever, then there's something that feels bereft or lost or diminished. But it was, I think, an important thing in our life to be able to recognize that this quality of transiency, or the fragile and say conditioned nature of those things that we delight in, that we think are always going to be there, to be able to take that step back and to consider, well, this reputation is already broken. My status is already a thing of the past. Maybe I'm a big cheese now, but later on, I'll just be shuffling around the garden, pruning my roses in my bedroom slippers. I remember my father was a judge, but a dog judge, not a court judge. He used to judge dog shows, and he was very eminent in his own field, judging dog shows in this country and around the world. And he was also a member of the Kennel Club and part of their board of directors. But they had an automatic condition that you had to retire from the board when you were 75. And so that I remember him after he was 75, saying how when he stepped down from the board of the Kennel Club, everyone assumed that he was not going to be judging dog shows anymore. And he was of that kind of, in that condition whereby, oh no, I'm being invited to go off and judge in America, or in China, in Brazil, in Australia, in South Africa. And being overburdened by this, having his bookings to judge dog shows 3 or 4 years in advance. And suddenly, when he left the board of the Kennel Club, it's like the invitations stopped coming in. And he said, well, just because I stepped off the board, then people assume that I've stepped out of the whole thing, and now, oh. And it was quite wonderful, really, because my father had the wisdom to recognize, I got really a bit carried away there. And that was something that seemed to be so important and so solid and so real. And I remember having a very poignant conversation with him a couple of years before he died. He died when he was 80, and he said, I was a very big fish in a very small pond. And that I was very touched that he was able to see that, and to be able to look back on his, say, that he was eminent in his own field, but also to recognize, and in a way, when he said it, I could hardly believe he was saying the words, like, it's only dogs, really. But my father is saying it's only dogs. Since his whole, kind of working life and all of his reputation and status in the world was around judging dog shows, but that was quite a wonderful thing to have had that wisdom to say, they're only dogs, really. It's not anything of ultimate significance. So the challenge then is to look at the things in our life that we take for granted, and where we don't see that the cup is broken, and that we take it to be a truth that I'm always going to be here, I'm always going to have these faculties, I'm always going to have this capacity, and that when we take those reflections to heart, and then seeing what happens within us, because when we take a simple statement like I'm of the nature to age, or all that is mine, beloved and pleasing, will become otherwise, will become separated from me. Just to take a phrase like that, or I'm of the nature to die. Every single one of us in this room necessarily will die. These bodies will all die one day. Again, maybe in 1 year, or 1 day, or 100 years. Pretty sure all of us will be gone in 100 years' time. And even if they worked out some kind of wonderful life extension program, tweaking our genes to enable us to live for 200 or 300 years, eventually, sooner or later, all of us, all these bodies are going to die and pass away. That's a fact, right? So it's to our ego, to our sense of self, there's something that goes, ooh, I don't like that. I don't like that thought. Well, that's a depressing thought. But if we pass through that thought, like passing through a curtain, like kind of walking through these curtains, if you pass through that tension in the ego that says, ooh, that's a bit threatening, I don't like that, or ooh, I don't want to hear that, that's an unwelcome thought. If we don't react against that, but pass through that, then we find on the other side the sense of, well, of course, how could it be otherwise? And we realize there was part of us that was just sort of holding out, hoping that it wasn't going to happen, or that I was never going to lose anything that was precious or beautiful or delightful to me, that I was always going to be able to keep everything that was near and dear. So we find the heart is able to be freed from that tension, that kind of stress that we carry around with us so much. So these kind of teachings, to see the brokenness in the cup, it can seem to be a depressing thought, or something that is, say, trying to take a sour look on life. But when we actually witness the change within us, when we do that, there's an actual sort of refreshment that comes to the heart. There's a sort of a vitalizing quality. It helps us to be much more alive. And so this is the aliveness that comes with the presence of wisdom, that sense of realism and being able to see life clearly through the eye of understanding, through the eye of wisdom, seeing how things really work rather than how we would like them to be, or how we think they ought to be, or how we wish they could be. But that sense of realism, of understanding how it actually works. So this kind of reflection, that is contained within Ajahn Chah's teaching there, is what's called the development of the perception of anicca, the anicca sanya. And so that this is, what part of the classical development of wisdom in Buddhist meditation, to develop this quality of seeing in anicca, seeing the changing nature of things. And it might be that you think, well, how come just seeing the changing nature of things how is that so special or different? That even a 3 or a 4-year-old can understand that everything in nature changes. Yeah, you see the leaves come out in the springtime, they're little and tiny and pale green, and then they grow up, and then it turns to autumn and they fall off. Or little children turn into bigger children, turn into adults and older people. Yeah, that's easy to see. And it's certainly easy in one respect. But many years ago, Lumpur Sumedho used to have a particular phrase, or a sort of little question or conundrum that he would use when he was talking about this kind of area. He'd say, what is it that Buddhas know that unenlightened beings don't know? What is it that Buddhas know that unenlightened beings don't know? And there was this sort of, he could put on this kind of portentous, sort of dramatic voice. Like, what is it that Buddhas know that unenlightened beings don't know? And he'd sometimes put it in such a way that, we're going to get some really sort of fantastic esoteric knowledge, some sort of mystical transmission now about the ultimate nature of the universe. And so he'd sort of occasionally ham it up a bit and get you all waiting and guessing. And then he'd say, what Buddhas know that unenlightened beings don't know is that all that arises passes away and is not self. And people go, that's it. And it was a deliberate letdown, because with that sense of building up the kind of the interest with a grand statement like, what is it that Buddhas know that unenlightened beings don't know? But what Buddhas know, what is known by the mind of wisdom, is this very, very simple truth, that all that arises passes away, that everything that comes together has to separate. And even though on an intellectual level that's very undemanding as a concept, it's because we don't see that then we're continually, surprised when the precious things that we have get interrupted by intrusions from outside, or that the things that we thought we owned suddenly disappear from our control. We thought we owned that car, but somebody's recognizes, we have Sunday afternoon talks, let's go and choose a nice motor. I'm not trying to cause anxiety in anybody, but hasn't happened yet to my knowledge. But it's because we don't see that fragility. We don't see that we can continually surprised by being intruded upon by things that we don't want, by losing things that we do want, that we thought we were the owners of. And then that shock in the heart is what we experience. So that in the Buddha's teaching, over and over again, when somebody enters the path of enlightenment or reaches the first stage of enlightenment, the way that that's characterized in the teachings, it's like the insight is described in the way of, in the Pali language, it goes yankinchi samudaya dhammang sabantang nirodha dhammanti. Whatever is subject to arising is subject to ceasing. So when someone enters the path of enlightenment, becomes a stream enterer, so that their enlightenment is completely, say, inevitable. So within a limited period of time, that being is definitely going to reach full and complete enlightenment. It's an irreversible level of insight. What they understand is simply that all that arises passes away. All that is subject to arising is subject to ceasing. So that what that means is that if we really understand that, if we really know that directly, then there is a radical change of view, and the way that we see ourselves, the way that we see the world, and we hold the whole of our lives and the world around us in a very, very different way. Another of the approaches that Ajahn Chah would make to this whole area, when we talk about anicca or impermanence, is the word impermanence is usually the way that it's translated, and so that talks about that quality of things change, that things come and go, and we can see that, and it can seem somewhat like an external or sort of material quality, like it's almost like just the aspect of physics. The objective reality of it is that it's a thing and it changes. If it's a thing, it's necessarily in a state of change. That's always the case. But more often than not, Ajahn Chah would render the word anicca as uncertainty. Because whereas the quality of impermanence is the objective aspect of it, the subjective aspect of it, the felt sense of when the heart meets with a thing that is changing, then what our heart experiences, what we feel, is uncertainty. We don't know what's going to happen next, right? So that then, in a way, the felt sense of anicca is being uncertain, not knowing, not being sure what's going to happen next. And so the development of that insight, Ajahn Chah would often recommend like an active, say, employment of that view. So over and over again, reminding ourselves that everything is uncertain, everything is impermanent, everything is changing externally, but that feeling of uncertainty, he would encourage us to consciously arouse that, to not get complacent or not take things for granted. And one of his statements is translated into English in one of his Dhamma talks. He says the extraordinary statement, "Uncertainty is the Buddha." It might seem like a very odd thing to say. The Buddha is uncertainty. Uncertainty is the Buddha. And the way he gets to that logically is that in one particular teaching, the Buddha says, "One who sees the Buddha sees the Dhamma. One who sees the Dhamma sees the Buddha." So he pointed out that if you're seeing the truth of things, it's as if you are seeing the Buddha himself. And if you see the Buddha, you're seeing the truth of things. And the truth of things is what? So the fundamental truth of things is the law of anicca, the law of change, that all things are in a state of change. All things are uncertain. So that if we're seeing that uncertainty, then we are seeing the Buddha himself. We are we're in the presence of the Buddha, if you like. So that another more, say, direct or simple way of recognizing it is that wisdom of your own mind, which truly sees, this is changing, this is uncertain, this is not fixed. That wisdom of your own heart, which sees that quality of uncertainty, that is the quality of pure wisdom, the Buddha wisdom. That when we employ that, when we live from that place, that is, say, employing that quality of pure wisdom that is an aspect of our own being. So when we are, say, developing this kind of perception, with looking at our lives, then Ajahn Chah would say, like, yeah, I would do it with everything, with the objects that I see, the objects that I would smell, like an odor of some food or of a plant, or the things I saw. I would keep saying to myself, it's uncertain. You say, well, that smells nice. It's uncertain. That smells horrible. That's uncertain. Well, that's beautiful. That's uncertain. That's ugly. Oh, that's uncertain. Yeah. Or even more close to home, our opinions and views. That I remember. That's uncertain. Yeah. Or when we take something to be absolutely right, and maybe people here are familiar with that song, I think, from Gigi, I remember it well. It was June, it was July. The whole song is revolving around, I think, Maurice Chevalier remembering incorrectly, over and over and over and over again, and the young lady is correcting him over and over again. So it's, in a way, that's right. You have right there a teaching on uncertainty. But we can be very convinced about our opinions, our memories, our ideas, and that we take them to be absolute realities. We take a thought or an idea and we say, no, it's true. England is a really great country. Well, that's an opinion. No, it's not an opinion. It's a fact. Well, you believe that opinion very strongly. No, I don't believe an opinion. It's a fact. So, how many areas of our life do we do that? Do we see ourselves doing that? We take a particular point of view that's our favored version of reality. We say, this is true, this is real, just because it's our preferred version of the description of things. And we miss the fact that our views are necessarily subjective or limited. We don't realize that. And so that this kind of practice is extremely simple but incredibly helpful. In the Thai language, the word for uncertain or not certain is mai nair. So this would, if you've ever heard Ajahn Chah's Dhamma talks in Thai, there's a few Thai people here would have listened to them maybe, but over and over again he is using this phrase, mai nair, mai nair. It's not certain. And that this is, say, how we can bring our own vision of things into alignment with reality. So you might think, well, this is actually just going to make me more insecure and worried about the future. But the point is not to be, say, creating anxiety, but more, say, loosening up our habitual rigidity of views. Like I was saying about developing the perceptions of the changing nature of the body. There's a friend of ours in America was a quadriplegic. When I was establishing the monastery in California, I spent a lot of time with him because he was one of the original board of directors of the group that was setting up the monastery. And when you're around people who are in wheelchairs, you develop a very different perception of the world, like stairs are a big obstruction, and getting in and out of buildings are a major feature. And the size of doorways you have to consider. And when you're having a conversation, towering over somebody who's in a chair. And one of the things that struck me very deeply, spending a lot of time with him, he said that people like himself in the community of those who live in and operate from wheelchairs, he said, we refer to you guys as TABs, TABs, temporarily able-bodied. Now, how many of us today came through the door and thought of ourselves, or coming along to Amaravati, how many of us thought of ourselves as temporarily able-bodied? Probably not many of us. Did I, when I was looking at the road signs, did I even pause to think, well, it's great that I could even see there's a road sign there at all? I confess I didn't. I thought all I noticed was that my vision was less great than it used to be, but I didn't reflect that. Oh well, it's a wonderful and helpful thing that there's any vision there at all. So that that kind of active contemplation of these aspects of our life, and that the fact that many of us sort of walked into this hall, that the presumption that we'll get up and walk out is a presumption, isn't it? It's minor, it's uncertain. Yeah, not all of us can be sure of that. Yeah, the perceptions that we have around what events occurred in the past, like Maurice Chevalier in Gigi. I remember it well. How many times do we say that? Well, not with Maurice Chevalier's accent, but we kind of recollect the past, and yet it proves itself to be completely unreliable. I've often told the story of how I went for a long walk through England in 1983 from Chidhurst Monastery in West Sussex up to the new monastery in what was new then, in Northumberland. And it was about an 830-mile walk. And 25 years later, I retraced my steps with the fellow that I walked with, Nick Scott, of portions of the way. And many of the places that we went to on that second walk that we were revisiting from the original walk, I hadn't been back there in the interim, so 25 years had gone by. And it was extremely impactful that every single place that we visited again wasn't the right way around. Like the St. Martha's Church outside of Guildford, St. Martha's on the Hill, they moved the whole church through 90 degrees. It was still on top of the hill, but the hill was a different shape, and the church had been turned around. And then the Noy Thompson's house in Tilford, that used to be right by the village green in the middle of the village. And the village green was still there, but her house had been moved half a mile outside the village. Still had the same driveway, but they moved the whole thing. And one after another, the village of Lytton in the Yorkshire Dales be completely reconfigured, and they planted a 300-year-old copper beech, but there wasn't one before. There was no big beech tree opposite the post office. I remember it well. And it was at first it was like, oh, that's interesting. That wasn't the way I remembered it. And then, oh, that's different too. And then, oh. And every single place that we revisited was not the way that I remembered it. And I again, along with my good eyesight, I used to be known for having an excellent memory, a reliable memory. And so here it was being demonstrated over and over again that what you remembered was a fabricated story. It was not actually what matches what's on the ground. So these kind of simple lessons, rather than thinking, oh dear, I'm really losing it, this is early onset Alzheimer's, or I'm having a senior moment, and thinking that as some kind of a terrible loss or something that's going wrong, that we could rather think of it in terms of, oh, look at that, Anicca. It was this was my perception of things, and my perception of things didn't necessarily match the reality. Look at that. So then we take those everyday instances and we bring them into alignment with our experience, and let that be a source of wisdom, so that then when we find ourselves saying, that's really ugly, to say, oh, meine, it's not certain. Or like tomorrow we're going to be going off to London. Oh, it's uncertain. Yeah. We know that we might have a plan to go to London tomorrow, but what that turns into, whether that actually manifests as a journey to London, we don't know. So that this was again a simple practice that Ajahn Chah would recommend. He'd say to keep bringing to mind that things are uncertain, and also in the way that we speak, so that when you're talking about your plan, say, we have a plan to go to London tomorrow, but if you find yourself saying, oh, I'm going to go to London, stop yourself and say, I've got a plan. I've got a plan to not have that bleep happening next week. Whether it happens or not, I don't know. I know that I have a feeling that it would be nice not to have it. That I can be sure about, but whether that bleep will ever stop, we don't know. So these are simple ways of recollecting. Even when I'm writing things or typing emails to people, over and over again, you're talking about, I will, or I'm going to, or next week we start our retreat, or I'm going off to visit such and such a person, going to my sister's 60th birthday in a week's time. I'll go back on the screen and sort of delete. Okay, I have a plan to go to my sister's next week for her 60th birthday. So that these simple ways, right there in the ordinary everyday activities, we can keep reminding ourselves of this simple quality of uncertainty. And then the main thing is not just doing that as a kind of behavior training, or as a sort of exercise in modifying our activities, but then see what that brings when you do that, when you recognize, oh look, I just said I'm going to, or I will, or these other ways that we have of making assumptions, and that when you stop that and you recognize, no, it's not a sure thing, it's not a certain thing, then notice what happens within you. What is the change when we recognize, oh yeah, I am temporarily able-bodied. Oh, how wonderful that I can hear as well as I do. How wonderful that I can move as well as I do. Even if I'm in a wheelchair, then I can still move around in a wheelchair. But what a delightful thing. There is still this mobility, but even this is going. This is in a state of change. This is in a state of transition. So when we look, when we are able to see that quality of uncertainty, of transiency, then what that does is that directly supports the insight into not self. Again, this is a major principle of Buddhist wisdom. And as the Buddha put it in the discourse to Meghiya, he said, one who establishes the perception of uncertainty, of anicca, within them, the perception of not self, the realization of not self becomes established. And one in whom the perception of not self is established, then they are able to let go of the conceit of identity, the conceit of separate existence, the conceit of I am. They let go of ego-centered thinking and habits. And as the Buddha then said in that same teaching, when the heart is freed of the conceit of I am, the conceit of identity, then that is nibbana, here and now. That is true peacefulness. That's a very helpful little package to recollect. When the heart sees anicca, that leads to, sees impermanence, uncertainty, that awakens the insight into not self, into selflessness. And when the heart lets go of self-centered views, self-centered thinking, and is freed from that conceit, then that is the realization of nibbana, of true peacefulness, here and now. So that the development of these simple practices to recollect that things are not under our control, that things are not predictable, things are uncertain. What that means is, over and over again, that we're seeing through the transparency of the I, me, and mine feelings, the conceit of identity, what's called asmimana in the Pali language. We're letting go of those self-centered ways of thinking, and we recognize that our bodies, our lives, our families, our work, our possessions, these are all aspects of nature in a state of change. These are all, say, qualities of the natural world that are inevitably changing, and they don't really have an owner. Just as we can say, technically, we're the owner of that car. I can say, this is my glass of apple juice. That ownership is completely relative, because one of you could just step up and say, no, it's not, it's mine, and take it away. But conventionally speaking, we say, it's mine. Yeah. But if we mistake that conventional ownership for something that's absolute, then necessarily we'll create tension and dissatisfaction, discontent within ourselves. When we recognize that feeling of ownership, or that technicality of ownership, is only superficial, it's only a convention, it's like a human agreement that we come to, then we're able to be free from all suffering. It's not easy to do, and it takes a lot of work to actively apply this kind of reflection to our lives. But when we begin to sort of shift the way in which we see our bodies, our lives, our possessions, our role in society, our families, our reputation, our social status, and so on and so forth, when we see that these are they're patterns of nature in a state of change, then what we do is we free our heart from dependency upon those. So that as things change, as our eyes get worse and our ears get worse, and the people leave us, or things are, say, moving in the direction of dissolution, as all things inevitably do, then rather than feeling a state of loss or diminution, or say that something has gone terribly wrong, or we're in a depleted state, in fact what happens is that the heart gets brighter and more contented, because we're recognizing, oh, it's just nature doing its thing. Okay, I can't move around so much, I can't think so straight, but this is just nature doing its thing. Nothing has been lost. This is just the natural order doing its thing. Nothing has been lost, nothing has gone wrong, nothing is out of order. This is Dhamma niyamata, the lawfulness of the Dhamma, the lawfulness of nature. So then this is a blessed relief for us, and that we are able to, say, find a quality of contentment and ease, even while the body might be not at ease, physical discomfort or disabilities that arise and so forth. But we find our heart is at ease, and I would suggest that's the thing that really matters. Now, Ajahn Chah would also say, when he would pick up a glass and say, Geo ni, dek lao, there mai tong dek, mai tong hai dek. So it means, out of my very bad Thai, this glass is already broken, but don't go ahead and break it. So he would always say that, it's already broken, but it's our responsibility to take good care of it, look after it, and do the best we can to keep it safe. But even though we do that, we know that one day it's going to go, but we do the best that we can to look after it. So just with our bodies and our work and our families and so on and so forth, we do the best that we can to preserve our well-being, look after our health, and preserve our relationships, and keep things together. But we make that effort in the context of knowing that sooner or later it all has to dissolve, so that we are, say, not acting in a casual or irresponsible or a foolish way, like like a wrong attachment to these ideas can create great confusion. But I think if we just hold it in that way, that the glass is already broken, but while it's still in one piece, then we take good care of it, we look after it. Then we're able to live at ease in the world, and able to, say, function comfortably. So we enjoy the faculties that we have and the situation that we live in, and that is something that we appreciate, but we take it as a bonus in a way, rather than something as an assumed right, or something that we are sort of supposed to have, or is something that is, something that truly belongs to us, or is our right to have and to keep and to know is always going to be there. Maybe the last thing to say is to encourage this quality of looking at our perceptions, looking at our memories, our ideas, our opinions, with that attitude of uncertainty. Because our culture and our conditioning is very much to make us believe that what we see and what we think is true, is absolutely real. But I find it very, very helpful to actively consider how dubious our perceptions are, how unreliable. Like I was talking about the memories of that walk through England, and how out of probably a dozen different places that we revisited, every single one was not the way I remembered it. And I don't think that I'm getting pre-senile dementia, that my memory is kind of still fairly functional, but yet the mind remembered things incorrectly. And so I like to encourage people to consider this, like to taking things like colorblindness. Maybe some of you are colorblind, and that you're very familiar with this domain. One of the monks at Abhayagiri Monastery in the States was completely red-green colorblind. So when he used to drive, when he was a layman and would drive his car, he had to figure out whether it was a green light or a red light according to the position on the sort of the traffic light, because the green and the red looked identical to him. They're just two different kinds of brown. So there's no red, as far as he's concerned, there's no red or green. When you say red or green, there's no internal difference between the two. He can't cognize what those might refer to. He has no red and green recognition. So you'd have to figure out, okay, the one at the top was the one at the bottom. So that recognizing that, oh, when we say, well, that's a nice color, recognizing, oh, that's a subjective opinion. That's something that just comes because I have a particular form of vision. It was also interesting, a couple of books I might recommend to develop this reflections on the uncertainty of perceptions. One is a book called Blink by Malcolm Gladwell, and he in it he talks a lot about eyewitness reports from say accidents or events where people are reporting to the emergency people or to the police, what happened when a certain accident occurred, and how extraordinarily unreliable people's perceptions were. That they're standing on the pavement right beside the junction where an accident happened, and they say, well, there was this blue BMW came around the corner, and then another person say, well, this red BMW came around the corner. No, it was blue. It was red. It was blue. It was red. It was blue. It was red. And then they showed us the closed-circuit TV camera, and it was green. I don't remember if that was actually an example, but it was numerous times people would see people in a identity parade, and they would get a fixation on what a person looked like, and the number of times they were completely mistaken and absolutely sure that they recognized a person or they saw something happen in a particular order, and over and over again is shown how the perceptions were faulty, and that we tell ourselves a story and then we start believing our story. Like when I was talking, and I would talk about that Tudong walk through England, I would tell people about going up to the top of the hill, St. Martha's, to visit St. Martha's on the hill, or going through Lytton, the village of Lytton in the Yorkshire Dales, and as I would tell the story, I would see the picture in my mind, but then we don't realize that what we're doing is we are reiterating the story. We're not actually revisiting the actual memory that was formed at the time. We're just retelling the story, and like a children's game where the story mutates from one person to another, so that you get the story has completely got scrambled by the end of the chain. Like the famous military telegram in India, send 3 and 4pence, we're going to a dance. When the original message was, send reinforcements, we're going to advance. And the other book I feel should be, in this respect, should be required reading for anybody who's interested in Buddhist meditation, is Oliver Sacks's book, The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. The title on its own tells you we can make some serious mistakes. The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. And he was describing various different cases that he was dealing with in his psychiatric work, and as a neurologist and so on. And it's quite amazing the variety and number of distortions that the mind can come up with, the misperceptions that the mind creates. And that I found after reading that book, it really enlivens that sense that, all right, this is a fabricated version. What we're experiencing now here in the Sala at Amaravati, this is the mind's fabricated version of reality. This is not actually reality. This is the mind piecing together a workable version of reality that functions pretty well. Like I'm sitting up here talking, you're sitting there sitting, they're sitting and listening, and the audio system is working pretty well most of the time. So as a functional reality, it functions well enough. But if we remember, this is not an actual reality. This is my mind's representation. This is the pieced together version of what's happening here in this hall at this time. when we simply remember that this is a kind of like a working hypothesis, this is a representation of the present moment's reality, then we can hold it all with that a greater lightness and greater flexibility. And when we do that, then we find that we're much more able to get on with other people, because of course if we recognize that, oh, well, my version of reality is just a fabricated representation, so that means other people's version is too, so that when we get stuck in that I'm right, you're wrong, that no, it's blue, it's red, it's blue, it's red, it's blue, it's red, then you realize, oh, my version of reality says blue, his version of reality says red. Okay, who's to say that I'm right and the other person is wrong? Like, I can't deny that other person's perception might have been red, but when I recognize, oh, my view is subjective, my perceptions are conditioned and dependent in this way, then that gives me a lot more, allows me to create a lot more space for all of you and how you see things. And so we're much more able to, say, get along with each other and allow room for each other's foibles and differences of perspective. So I see that the signals that 3 o'clock has come around, the tea is coming out onto the servery, so that's a signal for me to draw to a close, which I happily do, and then offer these thoughts for your reflection today.